Well, hello and welcome to the final part. I can't believe it's the final part already, but it felt like that all term. So here's the list of everything you need, and I'll also pop it below. But where we're talking dust colours, as you can see, I'm just doing the top row is going to be all for nature, and the bottom row is going to be to add some depth to our stonework, etc. So lemon yellows, moss green, dark green, chocolate brown, black and white. Now you can use grey too, but I like to use black and white mixed together because it just means I can decide how strong the grey is, if I wanted nice pale grey, and you can always go straight to that black to add absolute depth, like right underneath that stone sculpture. Now, of course, you don't have to add lots of shade if you don't want to, but you watch the difference with this now, going from that plain pale grey and the stone wall. Even though we marbled the stone colour, it just looks so much better when all this shading goes on. Now, I also left a few of those top stones loose on the wall so that I could move it. I can add in foliage as well, which we'll be doing later. Doesn't it make it look so much cooler? And I just love that temple when it's been dusted as well. Oh, don't forget to brush away the excess. Don't blow, never blow. I know this is only on a cake board, but if you get into the bad habits of blowing the dust away, it's gonna happen when you're using a cake, isn't it? So I always use a photographer's lens cleaner and just lightly blows away any of the excess dust. You'll see the wall better now as we're coming across, because watching that sort of profile changing, you can see it a lot easier on the line. Now, I like to add yellow to the edges of my grass, because if you've ever sat and looked at grass that's just overgrowing the pavement, have you noticed it's a little bit yellowy, got a bit of brown on the edges, and it's just where there's no root underneath that really edged bit of grass. So I always pop a bit of yellow on the edges that are going to come over some stone and around the base of the tree, and you can add some brown to the grass under the tree as well. But once I've dusted a little bit of the lemon yellow, I add some alcohol to my moss green, and if you want it brighter, like say a springtime cake, you can add a bit of lemon yellow to your moss green, and that'll make it look much more springy, like that gorgeous fresh grass when it first arrives. But by mixing in an alcohol like the culprit dipping solution, or you can use vodka, and if you've got plenty of time, you can also use water as well. Can you see it just gives a lovely washy effect to this grass? You also might see me touching the wall every now and again because, as I mentioned, adding little spots of extra colour here and there really change things. So then we're going to add some dark green to our moss green mixture. And you're not covering everything. Can you see I've now highlighted the shrubs? They now look completely separate from the grass. And some of those moss balls will be different colours as well. So you could have some of them in darker green, some of them in lighter green, and that just looks so nice. I'm also adding little bits of colour to the stones as well, because you know some stones that have been sitting for a while, they might have a touch of green on them or a little bit of brown on them, and it doesn't have to be all of them, but those fallen stones at the edge of the wall, can you see how much better they look now they've got a little bit of extra colour? And it's really nice to add some colour to the riverbed. Now, you could have done it in grey, you could have done it in brown, but I just wanted to sort of give the murky effect of water. So in other classes, we've done some just blue, you know, it depends on a really sunny summer's day. But we've had bits of grey, it's always obviously grey to start, but bits of green, bits of brown, and I just thought it looked really nice. Now the bridge. Now, can you see that that Pastillage red has faded slightly as it dries? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix some of the red that I've put in the equipment list with some glaze. Now, this is Saraceno's Liquid Shiny, but you can use any of the liquid edible confectioner's glazes that you've got. And the reason I mix it with the edible glaze is that you're not going to get any bits of colour falling off the bridge once it's dried. Because if you paint with alcohol, sometimes excess colour can fall off. And I also wanted to make the bridge shiny. So if you mix your glaze in, then that's absolutely perfect. But can you see I'm using an old lid? And the reason for the old lid is because it's really hard to get glaze off a beautiful palette. So the easiest thing to do is to keep your stacks of lids and use them as glaze trays. And you can actually peel the glaze off those really nice and easily. So this lid has been used many times. I've just got a stack of them in the cupboard. Now I felt that wall in particular needed some lovely bits and pieces to go on them. Oh yeah, spray your riverbed, because otherwise when you add the piping gel later on, then all of your colour might run. So we're setting the colour that we painted. So back to the wall. So basically what I'm doing is adding scraps of green sugar paste onto the wall, and now I'm pinching it with the tweezers, the same way as we did those shrubs. And can you see it just brings the wall to life a little bit as well? Now we don't want to leave our moss flat looking, so we're going to paint the moss in exactly the same way. Bit of lemon yellow and a little bit of moss green, and then even some dark green if you want to. Can you see those tiny bits I added at the edge of the river as well? And you can use both your tweezers and the nail brush to add the extra texture. So if you want little bits to look slightly overgrown, remember this is supposed to be fairly neat, but this is all about actual nature for me. I'm also spraying the moss area on our little waterfall because again, I don't want any of that lovely dusting colour I've done to bleed into the piping gel. Now I'm going to be releasing another one where we do this a similar area but using isomalt. So look out for that one as well. But this particular class wanted to learn how to just use piping gel because it's a very quick, very simple and very cheap solution to add in water. Now, what little water area in a Japanese garden would look right if it didn't have koi in it? So I'm using some of that leftover pastillage that we had. So you remember when we made the bridge and we coloured it red? Well, I always keep some double bagged, pop it in the fridge, and it's just so much easier. Now I'm pinching up the fins. Can you see I've narrowed the fish at the back as well? But I'm going to add the fins themselves on separately because I think that's a lot easier. Added a little bit of texture to them, but I'm using a paintbrush handle for the eyes, and I'm also using my scalpel to make the line for the mouth. My cat's really playing today. So I've got some terracotta now, the dust, and I've mixed it with a dipping solution again to add the very pale spots of colour. Then you can either use it neat and go stronger, or you can add a little bit of red as I've done. And of course you can add black dots as well. Now I've got a dotting tool, so you can push the dotting tool into the eyes to make it slightly deeper. So rather than having to make tiny balls of paste, because this is really small, all you need to do is to get the dotting tool, dip it in some black dust colours mixed with dipping solution and just dot on the colour. I've sprayed it as well because I'm going to put some piping gel over this fish. So I'm popping the fish into place and then I'm using my knife just to move some colour over it. There, doesn't that look so much nicer now it's got a fish in the pond? The water lilies, I'm doing this while the piping gel is still slightly tacky. So I'm just using my tweezers so that I can place them nicely. That is actually the cat charging around. There we go. They look so sweet. I absolutely adored the water lilies. And of course, if you missed that, have a look back through my playlist in the Japanese garden. And there's loads of different sections in there. But the water lily is, oh, I love it. Lots of ways of putting the ribbon on the side, but don't forget we're not doing a cake on this particular one. However, I wanted to show you the turntable method so that you don't get any glue at the top edge of the board. But you can also use double-sided tape as well. Oh, and there it is. I still got this piece in my cupboard because I couldn't bear to get rid of it. It was just also a lovely memory of a really nice term. Look how glistening the water is, and as the piping gel dries, it seals the surface on really nicely, so everything you've done stays in place. And those moss balls looking slightly wet as well, as they would do if water was sliding down them. You can see all the moss in the walls. Can you see the grey shadows on the rings? Can you see our little holes in the tree? And of course we dusted those holes in the tree and the shrubs, just that addition of dark green. Just so much fun to do this entire thing. And I've done Japanese style cakes in classes before, but we just did this one on a drum. Oh, look at that tree. And let's have a look at the finished cake completely. And there it is. Thank you ever so much. Stay safe, take care, and happy caking.